The first sign was a shadow. At 8:47 Greenwich Mean Time, satellites detected an object the size of Manhattan sliding past the orbit of Mars. Within minutes, there were 100 more. By the time the global networks caught up, the entire sky was crawling with black shapes that blotted out the stars. The Zorath Armada had arrived. They didn't bother to hide themselves. Why would they? They had conquered 47 worlds before this one. To them, humanity was just another name to be filed under subjugated species. In Washington, D.C., NORAD went silent for 6 seconds when their systems overloaded. In Beijing, defense satellites turned upward, already locking onto targets they knew they couldn't destroy. In Nairobi, school children pointed to the sky, as if watching an eclipse. The ships were vast, each one shaped like a steel predator, glowing with sickly green energy that pulsed along their hulls. They moved with impossible grace for things so large, like a pack of predators circling prey. The broadcast came 30 minutes later. Every screen, every radio, every frequency on Earth went dark. Then a voice, metallic and layered with something that didn't quite translate, spilled into every home, every car, every station. Humans of soul, you are outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. Lay down your weapons. Kneel, and you'll be spared. It wasn't a request. It wasn't negotiation. It was an inevitability, spoken by those who had repeated it countless times before. The aliens expected silence, then panic, then obedience. That was the rhythm of conquest. Instead, they got laughter. The first crack in their certainty came not from a general or a president, but from a soldier in New York. A live stream had been running when the broadcast cut in, and when it ended, the soldier looked straight at the camera, lifted his hand, and gave the invaders his middle finger. It spread instantly. In Tokyo, engineers in an underground metro hub began dismantling a captured drone. They hadn't even studied its systems yet, but already they were planning how to turn it against its masters. Someone filmed it, posted it, and within hours it had millions of views. In Nairobi, farmers dragged old plows and tractors into workshops, welding armor plates onto them. If they come to our land, we'll fight them with this. One man declared proudly, holding up a makeshift spear forged from tractor steel. Across the planet, humanity's answer echoed. Not fear, not surrender, but defiance. The Zorath couldn't comprehend it. For them, surrender was rational. Survival was logical. What value was there in resisting a fleet that could scorch continents with a thought? But humans were not logical creatures. We were stubborn, reckless, and unwilling to bow. By the time the Zorath broadcast repeated their ultimatum, the world had already decided. This time, Earth answered with a single unified transmission, a miracle in itself. Given our history of division and rivalry, but in the face of extinction, even enemies stood shoulder to shoulder. The message was only 4 words long, but it carried more weight than any weapon we possessed. We're humans. We don't surrender. In a command chamber aboard the flagship Vorakai, High Warlord Chalkor stared at the human reply. His mandibles clicked in irritation. Around him, holographic displays mapped Earth cities, oceans, and population centers. They were fragile things, ready to be extinguished. "This is expected," said his second-in-command. Primitive species cling to defiance until the first wave of bombardment. But Chalkor was not so sure. There had been something in the way the humans spoke. Not desperation, not bravado. Something heavier, something sharper. Still, protocol was clear. The hammer falls after the warning. On Earth, leaders argued in bunkers deep beneath the ground. Some wanted negotiation. Others wanted immediate retaliation. But most knew there was no choice left. This was not a war we could avoid. President Alvarez of the Pan American Alliance put it plainly. They think we'll kneel. then let's make sure the first thing they learn about humanity is that we never will. And so, across the globe, humanity prepared. In a garage in Detroit, an old mechanic named Bill Alvarez, no relation to the president, stared at a half-dismantled pickup truck. He and his neighbors had dragged it in when the skies darkened. Now, he was welding steel plate scavenged from a junkyard onto its frame. "What good is that going to do against starships?" his nephew asked, voice heavy with doubt. Bill just spat into the dust and kept welding. "Doesn't matter. They'll see it coming. They'll see we didn't roll over." In Moscow, a violinist played in the subway as families huddled underground. The music carried through the tunnels, soft and defiant, a reminder that beauty could still exist in the face of annihilation. In Sydney, graffiti began appearing on walls. "No surrender" sprayed in red across highways and bridges. In Lagos, young coders hacked into the Zorath signal, overlaying their broadcasts with looping clips of humanity's greatest moments: Armstrong on the moon, Mandela walking free, a child laughing, a soldier saluting. Every act was resistance. Every heartbeat was defiance. The Zorath Armada continued to circle Earth, their weapons primed, their patience thin. They had expected fear. Instead, they found a species sharpening its teeth. When the second ultimatum came, it was no longer a command. It was a challenge, and humanity's answer had already been spoken. We don't surrender. The Zorath did not wait long. At dawn, the first bombardment began. A beam of green-white energy lanced from orbit, slicing through the atmosphere like the finger of a god. It struck the outskirts of Mexico City, tearing a crater 2 kilometers wide into the earth. Entire districts vanished in fire. Then came the second strike, this time in Cairo. The desert shook. Ancient stones crumbled. The pyramids, which had stood for millennia, cracked and split under the fury of alien weapons. The Zorath believed this would break us. History told them it always did. But Earth's history is longer than their records, and its people harder than stone. Instead of surrender, they were met with fury. In New York, the first wave of ground troops descended in silver pods that cracked open like eggs. Zorath warriors, tall and armored, strode into the streets with plasma rifles that hissed like serpents. They found themselves staring down barricades of overturned buses, garbage trucks, and construction equipment welded into makeshift tanks. Civilians, police officers, dock workers, shopkeepers, fired rifles and shotguns from windows, stairwells, and rooftops. The Zorath were superior in every way. Faster, stronger, shielded by energy fields. But humans fought like creatures possessed. They didn't retreat when the first volleys cut their friends down. They charged. They screamed. They fought with knives when their bullets ran out, with bricks when the knives shattered. And when the Zorath commander ordered them to kneel, a woman covered in blood just spat at his feet. In Nairobi, the invaders landed near the plains. They expected easy prey. Instead, they met armored tractors with steel-plated wheels and flamethrowers strapped to their sides. Farmers who had never held a rifle before fired with steady hands, their children loading ammunition beside them, when a plasma bolt struck one of the improvised vehicles. It didn't stop. The driver, face burned and blistered, slammed the flaming tractor into the enemy line, screaming until the explosion drowned him out. The Zorath would later call them fire demons. Humans just called them neighbors. In Tokyo, engineers turned captured drones into weapons. The Zorath underestimated human ingenuity. Within days, swarms of hack machines flew against their masters, carrying explosive scavenged from abandoned factories. Too primitive to adapt, the invaders had said. The drones proved them wrong. Everywhere, the same story unfolded. In Sao Paulo, gangs and police, rivals for decades, fought side by side, their spray-painted banners reading, "No surrender." In Berlin, Hackers jammed enemy signals and broadcast Beethoven into their helmets until Zorath squads tore their own ears. In Mumbai, children carried water and ammunition to the streets while their parents fought in the shadows. Every city became a fortress, every street a trap. The Zorath learned quickly that humans did not fight for territory, for resources, or even for survival alone. They fought out of spite, out of rage, out of a refusal to let anyone else write the ending of their story. High Warlord Chalkor watched the resistance unfold from the bridge of the Vorath Kai. His mandibles clicked in frustration as reports flooded in. Ground forces in North America encountering unusual resistance. Urban combat in Africa, high casualties. Drone control compromise in Asia. Human countermeasures unorthodox. He snarled. Unorthodox? Explain. The officer hesitated. They reprogrammed our machines with primitive tools. They're using them against us. A silence fell over the chamber. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This had never happened before. Back on Earth, resistance leaders held their breath. General Amina Diallo in West Africa directed her scattered militias with nothing more than radios and maps spread across the hood of a battered jeep. Colonel Jackson in North America used subway tunnels to move weapons and troops beneath the city. Commander Sato in Japan coordinated engineers, hackers, and street fighters with the precision of a symphony conductor. They were not unified by nation or creed. They were unified by the simplest truth. We will not kneel. The Zorath escalated. They unleashed orbital strikes on London, on Moscow, on Johannesburg. Flames swallowed entire districts. Millions perished. And yet, every strike only sharpened humanity's resolve. Survivors dragged one another from the rubble, coughing, bleeding, and already swearing vengeance. When the aliens leveled Paris, the Eiffel Tower collapsed in a storm of ash. 2 days later, the same steel beams were welded into barricade around the Seine, blocking Zorath advances. Even our ruins fought back. The Battle of Lagos marked a turning point. Zorath shock troops marched into the city, their weapons glowing with deadly light. But the people had prepared. Coders had hacked into the invaders' helmets, overlaying their vision with false targets. Guerrilla fighters ambushed them from rooftops. Even school children threw Molotov cocktails from balconies. When a captured Zorath transport ship was turned against them, piloted by a team of Nigerian engineers who had never flown before, the aliens finally faltered. That was the first time in their history they retreated from a battlefield. For humans, it was proof. Proof that the giants could bleed. Proof that resistance was not futile. Word spread faster than fire. Lagos held. Humanity fights. From that moment, surrender was no longer an option. It was unthinkable. High Warlord Chalkor slammed his clawed hand against console, sparks flying. His mandibles clattered in fury. They were supposed to surrender, he hissed. They were supposed to kneel. But deep down, he felt something alien even to himself. Fear. Because for the first time, the Zorath were not facing prey. They were facing predators. And predators fight hardest when cornered. The war dragged on. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The Zorath had expected a swift conquest. Instead, they found themselves entangled in a conflict that refused to end. For every city they burned, 2 more rose in defiance. For every battle they claimed, humans answered with ambushes, sabotage, and rebellion. The skies were theirs, but the ground belonged to humanity. In New York, the streets were craters and ruins, but life refused to vanish. Families lived in subway tunnels lit by generator light. Resistance fighters slept in shattered skyscrapers, weapons cradled to their chests. In Lagos, victory songs echoed to the night, sung by children who had seen too much but still sang anyway. In Siberia, soldiers huddled in snow-covered trenches, their breath fogging the frozen air as they aimed stolen alien rifles at the skies. Everywhere, humanity endured. The Zorath commanders grew desperate. They unleashed bioweapons in South America. They triggered artificial earthquakes in Asia. They tried to choke our oceans with engineered algae. And every time humans adapted, doctors in Buenos Aires turned alien plagues into vaccines within weeks. Engineers in Seoul hacked seismic emitters and used them to collapse enemy bunkers. Fishermen in Manila dragged choking waters clear, setting fire to the alien algae with nets dipped in oil. We refused to die. The turning point came in orbit. A captured Zorath corvette, hijacked by a crew of mixed nations, led by Commander Sato from Tokyo, launched from a hidden base in the Andes. Its hull was scorched, its controls alien, but its crew was human. They had trained in secret for months, deciphering Zorath tech through trial, error, and sheer stubbornness. Now, they aimed it at the heart of the invader fleet. The Zorath Kai, flagship of the Armada, loomed above Earth like a steel god. From its core, the High Warlord directed the entire invasion. Destroy it, and the Zorath would falter. The corvette streaked through orbit, weaving between battleships and swarms of drones. Warning sirens shrieked across the enemy fleet. Shields failing, someone shouted in the human crew. Doesn't matter, Sato growled. Get us closer. Every alarm blared red. Enemy fire lit the void. Still, the corvette pushed forward, every human aboard knowing they would not survive. They didn't need to. They only needed to hit their target. With a final roar, they rammed the flagship's hangar bay, tearing through its shields in a storm of fire and steel. The Zorath had never witnessed such madness. Suicide attacks were illogical, but for humans, it was a tactic older than memory. The Zorath Kai shuddered, its defenses cracked, and the resistance poured in. On board, firefights raged through alien corridors. Human soldiers in patched armor clashed with Zorath warriors, blades and bullets against plasma and claws. One by one, humans forced their way toward the bridge. Blood slicked the walls, smoke filled the air, and still they pressed forward. High Warlord Chalkor watched them approach on his displays. His mandibles clattered in disbelief. They should be broken, he whispered. They should be begging. But the humans did not beg. They fought, and in their eyes he saw no fear, only fury. When the bridge doors finally blasted open, it was Colonel Jackson from New York who stepped through, his uniform scorched, rifle shaking from overuse. Behind him came fighters from Lagos, Moscow, Sydney, a patchwork army of Earth. Chalkor rose to his full height, towering above them, armored plates gleaming. "You are doomed," he snarled. "Even if you kill me, my people will—" Jackson cut him off with a single shot to the chest. The plasma round hissed, punching through armor and flesh alike. The warlord staggered, mandibles twitching. His last words rasped through blood. They were supposed to surrender. Then he fell. The death of the warlord shattered the Armada. Without his command, Zorath coordination faltered. Ships broke formation. Drones malfunctioned. Human resistance fighters across the planet surged forward, seizing every chance to strike. In orbit, hacked drones kamikazed into battleships. In the ruins of Paris, resistance fighters surged out of tunnels, overwhelming scattered alien squads. In the deserts of Australia, guerrilla units ambushed retreating forces, dragging their machines into the sand. Within days, the invasion collapsed. Within weeks, the Zorath retreated. Within months, they were gone. The war had scarred Earth beyond recognition. Cities burned. Billions were dead. The sky was black with smoke. But humanity was alive. And more importantly, humanity was free. In the aftermath, survivors gathered in the ruins of once great cities. They rebuilt with what they had left: steel, sweat, and stubbornness. In New York, children played in the shadow of broken skyscrapers, their laughter echoing through hollow streets. In Lagos, engineers dismantled captured Zorath machines, vowing to turn the enemy's weapons into tools of peace. In Tokyo, Commander Sato planted a flag atop the wreckage of the corvette. Not a national banner, but a simple cloth marked with 4 words: "We don't surrender." And so the legend began. The galaxy would remember the Zorath Armada not as conquerors, but as victims of their own arrogance. They came to Earth expecting obedience. They left broken, humiliated, and haunted. And across the stars, whispers spread, "Beware the humans." Because humans do not kneel. Humans do not beg. Humans fight. And in the end, that is what makes us dangerous.